Hi everybody, this is Mrs. Haynes. I will be your Algebra 2 or Geometry teacher this fall, or this whole year actually. And this is the calculator training class. So if these are the things you need to have. So if you don't have them, go ahead and pause it and go get them. You're going to need your calculator, you're going to need a pencil to write things down, and you're going to need the handout. The handout is on the 2 portal postings. It's also in the second email that was sent. So make sure you have those 3 things. The handout looks like this. So go ahead and pause it, and then when you come back, we'll get started. So I'm looking forward to seeing you guys next week in class. And the things that we're going to learn today are going to help you just to do the basic arithmetic stuff on the calculator. So we're going to go ahead and get started. I've got some software, so I'm going to share the screen for our software. Okay, so go ahead and what you should see is what you see. Hopefully you can follow along with this arrow. I know it's kind of small on your screen. This big screen here in the middle is the screen of your calculator. Because your calculator is tall and skinny, this is at the top of your screen. Because my computer monitor is short and fat, all of the keys underneath the screen are over here. Hopefully you've got a big enough monitor that you can see it. You can see all the keys that I'm going to be pressing. Down here at the bottom where it says key press history, it'll actually show the specific buttons that I push to be able to get the things that we do. So first of all, we want to make sure that you've got all your settings set properly for what we're going to be doing in these classes. So we're going to start by going to mode. So mode is right next to the second key up here at the top. So go ahead and click that. That's going to pull up some screens. I'm not going to talk through them. I'm just going to tell you how to set them. Okay, so this wheel that you see right underneath the words trace and graph, those are your up and down arrows to move things, and whatever blinking is where it's set now. So I'm going to go ahead and take it to the top. So Math Print and Classic are the 2 choices. You always want to be in Math Print. The older calculators only have Classic mode, but it's not nearly as intuitive and we'll never be using it. Next down, you want to be in normal mode. If you're in SCI, that puts all your numbers in scientific notation, which you may want to use if you're in chemistry this year when you're doing scientific notation, but most of the time it's not useful. Engineering mode, we're not going to discuss. The next one is float. You want to be in float. This means a floating decimal point. However many decimal points your answer has, that's how many it's going to give. If you put it on 0, so if we do the right arrow and we go to 0, that will round all of your answers to the nearest whole number. 1 will round all your answers to the nearest 10th. 2 will round all your answers to near the 100th, etc. So we're going to stay on float. This bottom one is probably the most important one of all. And all of up until now, the only way you've been able to measure angles is with degrees. When you get to the spring of Algebra 2 and all of pre-calculus, we'll be doing a lot of angle measurement in radians. But if you're in radians, it's going to mess you up for all your trigonometric functions. So you want to be in degrees. So if it's in radians, if it's in radians, make sure you do the right one and get to degrees, and you'll know you're in it if it's degrees up there. For the rest of it, function, thick, sequential, real, and full, you want the far left ones highlighted the whole time. For fraction type answers, most of the time in this level class, we want our answers as improper fractions reduced, so numerator over denominator. You also want your answers to be auto. That means most of the time they'll be decimals, but if you're doing certain things in fraction mode, it'll give you the answers in fractions. Go ahead and turn your statistical diagnostics off and your stat wizards on. I can't change the clock. If you want to have your clock tell you what time it is, that's fine. This one's kind of cool. You can actually switch it to a different language if you want. Let me get down to it. I think the only choice on most of the new calculators are English and Spanish. This one does Portuguese, Dutch. I don't know what all of them are, but anyway, I'm sticking with English. So anyway, so you make sure you have those set, and then if you don't want to see the screen anymore, you can hit clear, and you'll go back to it. And all of your settings will be here across the top. The most important ones to have is you need to be normal, float, and degree. Those are the most important ones. So because there's so few, because the calculator is so small, each key means 3 things. So with the number that you push on the front of the screen is what you get when you press it. If you need the things that are tiny and blue on the little bit either straight above the screen or a little bit to the left of the screen, you're going to use the second key to get to that. And then the ones that are light green, you're going to use the alpha key. So let's just try those for a couple times. Let's do something really basic. Let's do 8 plus 7. So you hit the number 8, and since it's on the screen, that's what shows up, plus 7. Notice when you hit that 7, it doesn't automatically give you a 15. That's because the calculator understands order of operations. And for those of you that had Mrs. Salter or Mr. Bartlett back in middle school, you know it's parentheses, exponents, multiplying and dividing are together, adding and subtracting are together. Also, you may have known it as please excuse my dear Aunt Sally. Because it's going to work everything in order, you have to type it in the right order. So I'm going to go ahead and put 7 divided by 3. So if you think about that, if it was 8 plus 7 and you did the addition first, 8 plus 7 is 15. 15 divided by 3 would be 5. So let's hit enter and see what we get. We got 10.33333 because we didn't do 8 plus 7 and then take that answer and divide it by 3. Division comes before addition, so it's 8 plus 7/3. Okay, now let's suppose most of the time when you're adding an integer and a fraction, you want the answer as a fraction, not as a decimal. And most of you, hopefully you know, that 0.33333 is really 1/3. But most of the time in Algebra 1 and above, you want the answer as an improper fraction. And there's a way to do that as well. So if your answer shows up as a decimal and you wanted it as something else, what you're going to do is you're going to go to this math key. So do you see the math? It says MATH on that key. Since it's on the key, we don't have to do the second button or the alpha button. We can just hit it. And it's going to pull up a menu. If we wanted some of these other menus, we could go across numbers, complex numbers, probability, and fractions. We're going to go back to math. We want our answer as a fraction. And since that one's highlighted, if we hit enter, that's going to be the one we choose. So we're going to hit enter. And it's saying, hey, that answer that you just had a minute ago, do you want it as a fraction? And we do. And so we're going to hit enter again. So it's 31/3. Like I said, that one's pretty easy. You could do it in your head, but the calculator will also do it for you. It works better on more complicated numbers. Okay. So the next thing I want to talk about that makes this calculator a bit different, let's go ahead and hit clear. And I'm going to go ahead and clear out my key press at the bottom. And like I said, the key press that I do are the actual buttons that I'm hitting. Hopefully you can see it with my arrows. The next thing I want to talk about is we have division, multiplication, subtraction, addition, and then entering our problem. Okay, what's different about this calculator is the minus sign, the subtraction sign, and the negative sign are two different numbers, two different places. Okay, so you can't use those interchangeably. Let's suppose we wanted to do 4 minus -3. Okay, so you'll notice on there that the minus sign on your screen is a little bit fatter, a little bit lower. So you can also tell it's a subtle difference. It's easy on mine because it's a ginormous computer screen, but hopefully you can tell that they're different. And we know that 4 minus -3 is the same as 4 plus +3, so we would expect the answer to be 7. But let's suppose you weren't remembering that it was a different negative sign. Let's suppose you put in 4 minus, and instead of putting the negative, you did another minus. So if you were writing this on your paper and you saw that, you'd say, hey, 4 minus -3, that's 7. But the calculator is saying 4 minus, and then it makes no sense because you can't do 4 minus and then minus again. You can't have 2 minuses in a row. So see what happens when you put error. You get a syntax error. And the reason you got that is because you're saying you're going to subtract something and you're not giving it something to subtract. So if this pops up, it just lets you enter something wrong. Let me show you what else can go south on these. Let me go ahead and clear it out. Let's suppose we did 4, 5, and let's suppose we're going to do 5. We meant to do 5 minus 3, but we used the negative sign instead. Okay? So it looks on your calculator like you typed in 5 minus 3, and you meant to type in 5 minus 3, but look what happens. That's because you typed in 5, you typed in negative 3, and just like when you're writing like 5x, if there's nothing between two numbers, they assume it's a times sign. So 5 times negative 3 is negative 15. If you have an older version of the calculator and you type this in, you'll also get a syntax error, which is fine. Okay? Also want to show you what can happen, another syntax error. Let's suppose we wanted to do 3, take a look on your paper at, do you see the one that says 8 minus 3, open parentheses 8, open parentheses 3 minus 1, close parentheses, close parentheses? We're going to type that in knowing that your parentheses signs are here and here, right above the 8 and the 9. So I'll let everybody take a second to type that in. And so you'll notice the way the parentheses work is these two are nested together, so the 3 minus 1 happens first, and after that these two are nested together, and so that's going to be the 3 minus 1 times the 8. So let's just talk about what that would be. 3 minus 1 is 2, 2 times 8 is 16, 16 times negative 3 is negative 48, 8 minus 48 you would expect to be negative 40. Let's see what we get. I did it right, so I forgot to write it out in advance. Let's suppose we had missed one of these parentheses when we were typing it in. So I want you to type it in, but I want you to skip the parentheses that's between the 8 and the 3. Okay? So we're going to have 8 minus 3. I'm going to miss that other parentheses. Okay, so you'll notice we have 1 open parentheses and 2 closed parentheses. Let's see what happens when we hit enter. You can't do it. And the reason you can't do it is because there's 1 open parentheses and it's 2 closed parentheses, and they just don't know what to do with that. So when you get those error messages, it's usually a sign that you either mixed up your negative sign and your minus sign, or you made mistakes with parentheses. Okay? One of the favorite things about this calculator for a lot of students, even if you're good at math, it's nice just to not have to mess with it, and that's how it can handle fractions. So I want you to take a look at the problem. Do you see the problem on your paper that says 3 plus 4 divided by 7? I'm going to enter in just like I said it. 3 plus 4 divided by 7, okay? But if you think about it, I didn't enter in like you see it there, because the way it's written on your paper, you should be adding the 3 plus 4 first and then dividing by 7. But because the calculator does order of operations, it's going to do this multiplication before it does the addition. Okay? And so you get that. So here's what you would have to do. There's a couple different ways you can handle this. If it's an easy problem, we know we need the 3 and the 4 being added together, so we can just use parentheses for that. I want you to guys go ahead and type it in with the parentheses. And of course the answer is going to be 1 because that's what we're looking for. But sometimes, especially when you're doing really complex stuff, this is going to come up a lot when we're graphing rational functions, and there's lots of like x squared plus 3x minus 7 divided by x cubed minus 5x plus 12. And you're going to want to group them like that. It's nice to actually see it like you're writing it on the paper. And we actually have a function. So this alpha key does all the light green functions. So what I want you to do is click that. And it doesn't call it this, so you just have to know it. But you see across the top it says F1, F2, F3, F4, and F5. We're going to use the F1 function. So we've got the blinking A, and that tells us that whatever button we push, it's going to use the light green one for that. So we're going to push this, and this is our F1 menu. And what we want to do is, it gives you the choice. You can enter it as a fraction. If you go down to number 2 and you highlight it and you choose this, you enter it as a mixed number. U stands for units, that's the whole number. N is numerator, D is denominator. So like 5 1/4, you would put 5, 5 would be the U, and then the 1, and then the 4. We're going to want our problem, we're doing the 3 plus 4 over 7. So we're going to want it up here. So I'm going to go back to that. Hit enter. And see, it kind of gives it to us as a fraction. So we're going to put in our 3 plus 4. And we haven't had a chance to use this much, but we can use our arrows. So we can use our down arrow that'll get us to the denominator. We're going to put in the 7. And we're not adding a problem after this, so you don't have to, but it's a good habit to be in. Go ahead and do the right arrow to hop out. So now what we've got looks exactly like what's on your paper. Okay. If you look on your paper, I want everyone to do the fraction that you see that's 384 plus 266, whole thing divided by 40. I want everybody to do that. I'll give you a minute to do that. If you're not done before I start talking again, just pause the video and you can do it. While you're doing that, I'm going to clear this out. So if you were stuck, it's alpha F1. We want it as numerators and denominators, so we're going to hit enter. It's already highlighted. We use the down arrow to get to the denominator. We use the right arrow to get out from underneath the fraction. And it will always give you the answer in reduced form. So it's an improper fraction reduced. Okay, let's suppose you want it as a mixed number. Let's talk about how to handle that. So again, we're going to go to our fraction menu. So we go to alpha, we choose F1, and down here, look at the, you see how these arrows work? What this, if we go down and we get down to the third option, if it's given to us as an improper fraction, it will give us an answer as a mixed number. And the reason the double arrows are there is if it was a mixed number, it would give it to us as a fraction. So you want to scroll down and make sure your 3 is highlighted and hit enter. And it's saying, hey, do you want to take your answer and change it from a improper fraction to a mixed number? And we do, so we hit enter again. And the answer is 16 1/4. So you can play around with that. Why doesn't everybody try the problem that you see on your handout? Do you see where it says 3 2/5 plus 1 1/4? I want everybody to try that one. I'll wait a minute or so while you do that. 3 2/5 plus 1 1/4. And I want you to use the F1 mode to do it. Okay, I'll talk, hopefully most of you have already gotten it by now or pretty close, but if you're stuck, I'll talk you through it. So the first mixed number was 3 2/5. So we're going to go to alpha, choose F1. This time it's a mixed number, so we need to be on the number 2 because the number 1 will only give us a fraction and we need it to be a mixed number. So I'm going to use my down arrow to highlight the 2 and then hit enter. And now I can just put in my numbers. And remember, when you need to scroll among the boxes, you can use your rotation wheel. I'm going to make a mistake on purpose here in a second. I use my right arrow to get out of it and put a plus sign. I'm going to forget that I need that, and I'm just going to type in the 1. The problem is, now that I've got that 1, I don't want it because I need to enter it as a mixed number. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do my back arrow. and I'm going to hit delete, and that'll clear it out so I can start all over again. So now I know I need 1 1/4, so I'm going to go to alpha, F1, take it down to the number 2, and obviously you guys will be a lot faster at this. I'm going slow so everybody can follow. Okay, so the answer is 93/20. Now I want you guys to change that to a mixed number on the calculator. So we go to alpha, F1 menu, we come down to number 3 because that takes us from an improper fraction to a mixed number. This one's quicker just to do in your head, but it's there if you need it, if it's a more complex problem. Okay, so like I said, you can play around with fractions a lot on those. You can do it with parentheses and hit math frac if it's easy, but if it's complex, you'll want to be in the fraction menu. When we start graphing rational functions, you'll also want to do it with the fraction menu. Okay, so now I want to talk a little bit about powers and roots. So go ahead and clear all this out. Let me get all mine cleared out. Okay, so what we're going to do now is we did this a little bit at the beginning. So let's go ahead and do 4 squared. So we've got 4, and then this x squared button means it just sets it up so that it squares it. And everybody knows the answer to that is 16. Okay, now I'm going to do negative 4 squared. I want you to hit the negative 4 in the square, but do not hit the enter button. Just look at it. And I asked this question when I did the class, and most people, when they guessed an answer, they guessed negative 16. So let's see what happens. I mean, they guessed 16, yeah. The answer is negative 16. And the reason they guessed 16 is they knew that negative 4 times negative 4 was positive 16 because a negative times a negative is positive. But remember, this calculator does order of operations. And order of operations says if you write a number like this, it'll do the exponent and it'll treat the negative sign like a minus sign. So 4 squared is 16, and then it takes the negative of that. Let's suppose you actually meant negative 4 squared. You meant negative 4 times negative 4. That's when you've got to do parentheses. And that'll give you the answer you're looking for. Okay? So let's suppose you want a higher power. Let's suppose we wanted 5 to the 4th power. I wish it was a better button. I'm not crazy about how this one looks, but if you see this up arrow, it's right above the division sign. That's what'll give you exponents. So if we were going to do 5 to the 4th power, it would look like this. Okay. Let's suppose we were going to do, hopefully you remember from your Algebra 1 class, you remember how to do negative exponents. Let's do 5 to the negative 2 power. Remember, you've got to do the negative sign, not the equal sign. But typically, they don't want the answer as a decimal. They want it as a fraction. Quick way to get there is you go to math, and it's already highlighted. It's saying, hey, do you want that answer as a fraction? And we do. So it's saying, hey, you want your answer as a fraction? Yes, we do. 1/125th. Okay? So that's how that works. Just a reminder, I think we did this. I can't remember if I did this in the real class or this recording class, how to do square roots. Let's suppose we wanted the square root of 25. If this was a regular calculator, you would type in 25 and then you would hit the square root button. This one, you actually want to set up the square root ahead of time. So you'll see the square root sign right there. It's a blue one right above the x squared button. Okay? So hopefully everybody sees it. My arrow is pointing to it on the left of the screen. So because it's blue, we've got to go to the second function. And this arrow just on the screen just tells you in the second function. And so we're going to hit that, and it pops up our square root sign. So let's just go ahead and put in, I don't know, 25. And even though you don't have to, I like to move out of it and then hit enter. Let's suppose we were going to do the square root of 25 plus the square root of 36. So we would do the second function, square root, 25. And then we need to get out from it, so we're going to do a right arrow to get out from underneath it, plus, we're going to do the second function again, square root 36. I'll give you guys a second to get caught up. We'll do the right arrow and hit enter. Obviously, that's going to be 5 plus 6, so hopefully it's going to be 11, and it is. Okay. So it's a little more complex if you want to do, let's see what all I've covered already. If you want to do different roots. Let's suppose if you look on your paper, do you see where it says the cube root of 8? Hopefully everybody already knows that's 2 times 2 times 2. But let's suppose we wanted to do it on the calculator. So cube root of 8, what you're going to have to do is you're going to have to go to a menu. It's not an important enough or common enough thing to not be a key, to have its own key, even in blue or green. So we've got to go to menu. So we're going to go to math again. And if you look down here at number 4, you can see it's the cube root, and then they start a square root sign, and they start the parentheses. So you're going to use your down arrow to get down there. You can hit enter. And it's the cube root of, and we're going to put the number 8 in there. Okay. Let's suppose we wanted a higher root. So I'm going to go ahead and clear this out. Okay, I think the one I have on the paper is the 5th root of 243. So I hope everybody sees that. So again, the 5th root doesn't happen frequently enough to get its own key, even in blue. So we got to go to a menu. And you'll notice this one down here for number 5, it has X and the square root sign. That's going to allow us to put a number in, any number we want for the index and for the radicand. So we're going to scroll it down until we get 5 highlighted. And I said the 5th root. And then we're going to use our right arrow to get underneath the radical sign. Put in the 243. And then we're going to use the right arrow to pop out of it and hit enter for our answer. And the answer is 3. Okay. The last thing I'm going to touch on, and then we'll wrap, and that'll be the end, is I want to talk about what happens with really, really big numbers and really, really small numbers. For those of you that are taking chemistry this year, it's going to come up. Atoms are so tiny, when you start dealing with Avogadro's number and some of that, and with how many moles something how many atoms are in a mole, things like that, you will be messing with scientific notation some of the time. I think it probably comes up in physics, but I can't think of a specific example. So let's see what happens when the numbers get really big. I want everyone, if you look on your paper, we're going to enter 108 to the 4th power. And don't hit enter yet. We're just going to think about the number first. Okay, so that really means 108 times 108 times 108 times 108. Let's see what we got. It's a really big number, right? I got to put my commas in. So it's like 136 million, blah, blah, blah. Okay, I want you to type this in, but don't hit enter. We're going to raise it, same number, but instead of raising it to the 4th power, we're going to raise it to the 5th power. Okay. Do you think that number is going to be bigger or smaller than the number we just did? It's going to be bigger, isn't it? Because we're multiplying whatever that answer is, we're going to multiply it by 108. I want you to see what happens. This actually happens a lot when I teach earth science. When we do earthquake problems and we're raising 32 to a really big power because of changes in earthquakes, whenever students get an answer like this, I know they did it on the calculator and they're off. So first of all, it looks smaller. You see that 1.46? That's because if a number is too big or too small to show on the calculator automatically jumps to scientific notation. So we're going to write this number and we're going to round it to the nearest thousandth. So to the nearest thousandth, that's going to be 1.470. Now, since we rounded it to the nearest thousandth, the 328077 will come out. But I want you to focus on that E, that little bitty capital E. When you see that, you're going to replace it with the time sign and a 10. And the 10 is going to be raised to whatever power you see after the E. So I want you to look, hopefully there's a little bitty picture of me. I'm going to try and hold this up so that you can see it. that's what you would have to write, because that number on the calculator means 1.469328077 times 10 to the 10th power. So the E just means times 10, and whatever number comes after the E is the power that it is. Okay, so that's how you would write it. When you read it, that's how I expect you to read it. And I forgot to put this on here, but I'm going to write a math problem that we're going to enter. So if you want to write it down when I hold it up. Okay, so here's the problem that we're going to work. And unfortunately, when I hold it up, I can't read it. So I'm going to hold it up for a second for you so you guys can copy it, and then I'm going to turn it around and read it. Okay, so it says 4.07 times 10 to the third power plus 54 times 10 to the fourth power. So if you're doing a scientific notation problem, here's the way you can write it shortcut on the calculator. So type in the 4.07, but instead of typing in times 10 to the third power, there's a shortcut way to do this E. So I want you to notice above the 7, you see that double E? It's 2 capital E's in blue. That's the shortcut way of getting the scientific notation shortcut. So we're going to go to the second button, and then we're going to hit that. And we know that it's 4.07 times 10 to the third power. So we're going to put that in. When you read these out loud, I'm pretty strict about this in class. It doesn't really come up a whole lot in my class, but like I said, it'll come up in chemistry. It might come up in biology. I don't know if you do big and small numbers in biology. I would expect you to read that 4.07 times 10 to the third power plus 54. And again, it's times 10 to the fourth power. So we're just going to do our double E. Put a 4 in there. And it'll give your answer. So the answer is 544,070. And if you remember from your math, that's the same thing as 5.44070 times 10 to the 5th. Okay, so that's how you do those. Okay, and I think that's about it. So we talked about the negative. We talked about the importance of parentheses. Actually, let me go ahead and stop share. We talked about the importance of parentheses. We talked about the importance of the negative sign versus the minus sign. We talked about order of operations, and we talked about how to handle fractions. I think that's about it. So hopefully this will help you get started on your new calculators, and I look forward to seeing everybody in class next week. Bye, everybody.